Hi there, I'm Tim Gray of Gray Learning, and thanks for tuning in to this presentation as part of the Lightroom Virtual Summit, where I'm going to be talking to you about finding photos, ideally finding photos fast in Lightroom Classic. I think you might be impressed with all of the variety of ways that we can filter and otherwise locate our images in Lightroom Classic. The way I think of it is that whatever details you can remember about a particular photo can probably be used to track down the image you're looking for. So let's dive in and take a look at some of these great features for finding photos in Lightroom Classic. Okay, so before we take a look at some of the many techniques you can use to find photos fast, let's take a little bit of a step back really quick and consider what it is that enables us to find photos and therefore to think about some of our workflow considerations. And so when it comes to finding photos, what we're essentially doing is using the information about our photos to locate a particular photo. And that could be a variety of considerations. So for example, we could track down a photo based on which camera was used or which date you captured the photo. Even star ratings, for example, looking for favorite photos or which folder a photo is contained in. And so when it comes to your overall organizational workflow, you'll want to think about these factors, these workflow considerations, making sure essentially that you're assigning information to your photos that will help you locate those photos later and that you're doing that consistently. So let's take a look at a couple of examples, workflow considerations you may want to keep in mind. For example, one of the tools that I use within Lightroom Classic is to assign a red color label to every image upon import using a metadata preset. And so if I navigate to this folder here, this Cruise 2020 folder, I'll switch in fact to the grid view by pressing the letter G on the keyboard, and you can see that every single image in this folder has a red color label assigned to it. And that indicates to me that I've not yet reviewed these photos, and it also means that I want to go through and identify my favorites versus my outtakes. And so here, I need to review these photos. Of course, in other folders, I have photos that I've already reviewed. Note, by the way, it's also possible to assign a color label to a folder. So just as I use a red color label to identify photos I've not yet reviewed, I use a red color label assigned to a folder. You can just right-click and choose to add a color label. And so I use red to signify that this folder contains photos that still need to be reviewed. And I can even mark a folder as a favorite, so you'll see that I have a little star attached to this Austria 2019 folder, and that indicates that is a favorite folder. I can right-click on a folder and choose to mark it as a favorite or to remove that favorite status. And so that enables me to be a little bit more organized in the first place. I also use a folder structure, and I try to use a consistent and meaningful folder structure. This will depend on your specific needs, your preference as a photographer. For me, much of my photography typically involves travel, and so the way I usually think about my photos is based on trips to a particular destination. And so that is the primary approach that I use for naming my folders, for having an organizational folder structure that reflects the way I think about my images. You might use a different approach. You could use a date-based folder structure if that works for you. I can never remember what day it is or what date I captured a particular photo, so that doesn't work very well for me, but if it works well for you, that's wonderful. And the key really is that you want to have a structure that is meaningful because, as we'll see a little bit later, that folder structure can be very helpful for locating specific photos. And then, of course, identifying favorites. And so if I navigate to another folder here, you'll see that I have some images. Here's an image with a 2-star rating versus a 1-star rating. I might mark outtakes that I want to delete with a reject flag. The key is that I'm identifying favorites versus outtakes. And I happen to use an approach where a 1-star rated image is a keeper. It's a photo that I like. 2 stars represents a favorite photo from a given trip. 3 stars might be favorite photos from the last year. And 4 stars would be, favorite from the last decade, not necessarily literally, but just to give you a sense of sort of that tiered favorite status over time with my photos. And the bottom line is that if you have a good organized start, if you're assigning keywords to your photos, if you're updating maybe some of the metadata for your photos, if you go out and buy a new camera that has a built-in GPS receiver so that your photos will appear on the map automatically, again, the more information you're assigning to your photos from the start, the more information you'll have to locate, to search for those photos at a later date. So let's find some photos and, find photos fast, really. Obviously, we'll spend some time going through these various techniques, but the idea is that once you understand the possibilities for finding your photos, you should be able to locate a given photo relatively quickly. And as you'll see with some of the options for filtering our images, the way I think about it is whatever details you can remember about your photos, you can probably use those details to locate a particular photo. So we're going to start off with what I think of as really kind of the most basic option when it comes to locating particular photos. And you'll recall I was talking about the folder structure here. If you're using a folder structure that is meaningful and that reflects the way you think about your photos, then you'll be able to hopefully more easily locate a particular photo. And one of the easiest ways to go about that is to navigate to the folder, essentially, that you believe contains the photo you're looking for, and then filter the images based on favorite status. Now, I tend to use star ratings as my primary tool for identifying favorite photos, but you could also use pick and reject flags in Lightroom Classic. You could use color labels. So there are several options. I'm going to start off with star ratings. We'll take a look at the other options here momentarily. And so first and foremost, I might want to navigate to a particular folder. And one of the really cool features in Lightroom Classic, especially if you've got a lot of images and therefore a lot of folders, then you may end up with a rather long folder list. And we can actually search. So up at the top of the folder section on the left panel in the library module, there is a search field. So I can click into that search field, and let's say I'm looking for folders from trips to New York City, for example. I can start typing in New York. Of course, that's really treated as the word new and the word York. And so you'll see Albuquerque, New Mexico is a search result, but also the New York City folders that might contain the images that I'm looking for. And so I can filter by typing in, essentially searching based on the name of the folder. I'll click the X to clear that out. And over to the left of that search field, you'll see a little magnifying glass icon. That's actually a pop-up. So I can see all folders. I can see only my favorite folders, which in this case happens to just be one folder at the moment. I can also filter based on color labels. So since I'm using a red color label to identify folders that contain images I've not yet reviewed, I could use that red filter in order to find only the folders that have images that need to be reviewed, or whatever it is that you've decided a red color label for a folder might mean, for example. So I'll go ahead and switch this back to all folders on that pop-up, and then I can navigate to a particular folder. So let's say I'm looking for an image that I believe was taken during my most recent trip to Austria. I can navigate to that folder, and of course I could browse through all of the images. Now here I just have a subset of my overall collection of photos captured in Austria on that trip. But under normal circumstances, you might have thousands of photos in a given folder. And so you'll want to find some way to filter those images down a bit more meaningfully, down to a smaller number of photos. And so I'm currently in the grid view display. I'm going to press the letter E on the keyboard to switch to the loop view display, so that in the primary image review area here, I'm looking at a single photo, but I still have my film strip down at the bottom of the screen so that I can see all of the photos that are in the current folder. Well, at the top right of that film strip on the bottom panel here in Lightroom Classic, there's a set of filter criteria. Now, if you don't see all of these options, the filter label here is actually a clickable link, essentially. I'm going to click, and that will collapse those set of filter criteria So if you see something like this where the options are not listed there, you can simply click the word filter and you'll see the options appear. And those options are the pick versus reject flags, whether or not a photo has been edited, star ratings, color labels, and then we have a saved filter option here as well. I'm going to start off here with star ratings, and there's two ways that I can enable this filter. I can click the little, what I think of as a light switch toward the top right of the film strip. That enables me to turn on or off the filter criteria. But I can also just click directly on any of the filter criteria. So let's say I want to see all images with a 1-star or greater star rating. So I can click on the 1-star option there. So I'll click on 1 star, and just to the left of the list of stars, you'll see that there is an option for whether or not we want to view ratings that are greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or exactly equal to. So I can click on that pop-up and choose the appropriate option. I imagine for most of us, most of the time, the option you're going to select is that greater than or equal to. So I want any image with a 1-star or greater star rating. And so that immediately filters down the images. Now again, in this folder I don't have a huge number of photos, but on the film strip, toward the top left of the film strip on the bottom panel, you can see that this filter has brought me down to 17 images out of a total of 68 photos in this folder. And so again, simply by navigating from one folder to another and then identifying the filter criteria, I can quickly get to my favorite photos. So if I believe that I'm looking for a photo that was captured during my most recent trip to Austria, all I need to do is navigate to that appropriate folder, in this case Austria 2019, and then with the filtering options, I can use whichever criteria make the most sense to me, but personally that tends to be star ratings. And now I've already narrowed the range of images down somewhat significantly, and possibly to the point that I'm already able to identify the specific photo that I'm looking for just from the thumbnails on the film strip. And so, again, going through and bearing in mind that it's important to actually assign, for example, those star ratings or to have a useful folder structure in the first place, but then you can use that folder structure and the metadata that identifies your favorite photos as a really quick way to locate a particular photo. And that is just a very basic starting point. So let's consider some of the other options that we might use. I'm actually going to press the / key on the keyboard, and that will switch us to the grid view if we weren't already in the grid view, but it will also make sure that the library filter bar is displayed up at the top of the image preview area. We can also go to the View menu, by the way, and choose whether or not we want to show that filter bar. And this provides us with the same options that we found on the film strip. So at the top right of the film strip, we had the pick and reject flags, whether or not the image had been edited, star ratings, and color labels. And I can also access those options on the Attribute tab of the library filter bar. And so there again, we will find pick and reject flags, or in the middle there we have unflagged, whether or not an image has been edited or has not been edited, the star rating that we took a look at before, color labels, so I could, for example, turn off the star rating and turn on a filter based on color label. In this case, I don't have any photos with a red color label, but let's assume that I did. I'll add a red color label to this photo, for example. And now I set a filter for red. I could also set a filter for a 1-star or greater rating. I can mix and match these various criteria. And so, again, depending on which of these elements you use in your own workflow, pick and reject flags, star ratings, and color labels would be popular options for identifying favorites. Or, of course, if an image had been edited in the develop module, the fact that it was edited probably suggests it might be a favorite, so that could be a good option for you as well. And it's worth noting, not available on the film strip, but included here in the attributes section of the library filter bar, there is a kind option. So let me switch to all photos. I'm going to go up to the top of the left panel here in the library module, and in the catalog section, I'll choose all photographs, and then I can click on the first button for kind, and that means master photos, so the original images, for example, original raw captures,
Or I'll turn that filter off. I can filter based on virtual copies that I've created to create unique interpretations of a photo. And I'll turn that virtual copies option off and choose the third option, which is to show me videos. In this case, I don't happen to have any videos in this catalog, but if there were any here, that would enable me to see only those videos, for example. And so then we can look at some of the, I guess you could say, more sophisticated options. Well, first and foremost, note that I have now browsed all photographs. And so I'm viewing every single photo in my entire Lightroom Classic catalog. And so I can filter, for example, show me 2-star or greater rated images, or show me images. Well, in fact, I could take that up a notch to 3-star or better images. So I can filter across all of the photos in the entire Lightroom Classic catalog, which is a really powerful feature. And we'll see some more examples of that a little bit later. But here, just using star rating, some of the various attributes on the appropriately named attribute tab of the library filter bar. So again, that gives us some great flexibility. Another option that is worth being well aware of, and in fact, if you're not already familiar with the library filter bar, you might have already run into an issue, a bit of confusion perhaps when you switch between folders, and that's because by default, the filtering criteria are unlocked. And so, for example, if I have it unlocked, so I've clicked this lock icon to unlock the filter, and now when I navigate to another folder, the filtering criteria have been set to none. So you'll see the none option here for the library filter. And so now I'm seeing all photos in this folder. So then maybe I say, well, I want to see only the 2-star rated images, and then I navigate to a different folder, and I'm now viewing all images once again. Now, of course, you might like this behavior. You navigate to a different folder, you're sort of starting fresh, and so you want to clear out the filter criteria. But for me, I usually prefer to lock the filter criteria. And so let's go ahead and use a 2-star rating, for example. And now I'm going to lock. So notice that the lock looks opened, at least a little bit, when the filter criteria are unlocked. I'll click again, and you can see that that lock shows that it is indeed locked. And now when I navigate to different folders, the lock will ensure that the same filter criteria are being used. And so as I go from one folder to another, and for example, get to a folder where there are no 2-star rated images, for example, then I'll see that no photos match the filter, but I'm locking in those filter criteria so that I'm able to browse across multiple folders a little bit more easily. And by the way, speaking of searching across multiple folders, in some cases, you might not know exactly which folder you're looking for an image in. Where will the actual image be? Here, for example, I have several folders from different trips to Austria, and I might not be sure exactly which folder the image I'm looking for is contained in. Well, I can select multiple folders. And there's a few ways that we could go about this. Well, to begin with, I have in this case an Austria parent folder, and so I could go to that parent folder and then make sure that on the menu, the option is selected from the library menu to show photos in subfolders. So now I'll not only see the images in that parent folder, which in this case happens to be no images, but I will also see images from any of the subfolders down below. So if you have a parent and child folder structure arrangement such as this one, that is an option. But in addition, let's say, for example, with these Italy folders, I don't have a parent that I can easily go to. Well, I can click on one folder, for example, and then hold the Shift key on the keyboard and click on another folder, and all of the folders in between will be selected. Or let's say I know that the photo I'm looking for was photographed in Italy, and I know that it was an odd-numbered year, I just don't remember which year. I could turn off the 2018 folder here, for example, by holding the Control key on Windows or the Command key on Macintosh. So I'll go ahead and hold the Control or Command key and click on that folder, and now that folder is not selected. So I can sort of mix and match, essentially, in terms of which folders I'm browsing at any given time, which can be very helpful if you're not exactly sure which folder a particular photo is located in. And again, with the filter criteria locked, I can switch amongst various folders and keep the same criteria set. I could, of course, change that criteria at any time, switch to a 1-star or greater rating, for example, or whatever details I need to use to try to zero in on the appropriate folder. And more importantly, of course, the photo that I'm actually looking for. Now, of course, I've been working with folders here. If you've also created collections to group photos together for a particular project, for example, keep in mind that you can also navigate to those collections. So, for example, here's a collection of photos from Italy 2019, and I'm still using that filter criteria. So I have a 1-star or greater filter set. So I'm only seeing the images with a 1-star rating that are contained within this particular collection. So whether you're using folders or collections, you can still navigate among those folders and collections and set your filter criteria appropriately. And then once we've navigated to a particular set of photos, whether it's in a collection, a folder, or the all photographs catalog, for example, then we can make use of some filtering criteria as well. And this is available in the grid view display. We have a sort pop-up, and I can choose which order I want to sort my photos by. And I typically use capture time. That just seems the most logical option to me. But there are, of course, as you can see here, other options available. We can sort by the file name. We can sort by star rating. So since I use star ratings to identify favorite versus not so favorite images, I can use that rating option. And notice with star rating, it automatically defaults to the sort order being essentially from the greatest number of stars to the lowest number of stars, so a descending order versus an ascending order, but I can click this A to Z versus Z to A button in order to switch that order. And so that gives me some flexibility in terms of how I'm browsing my photos, and I might want, for example, the highest rated images first, or any of the other criteria. I could use the pick flag, obviously, pick versus reject flag, and so you'll see a variety of other options. File type sometimes can be helpful here. And again, this is just sort order. We can also filter by many of those different attributes, so we'll want to keep that in mind as well. All right, so then as we start getting a little bit more sophisticated, then we might start thinking about metadata values, for example. So recall that, well, so far we are using metadata. So the folder, I suppose you could think of that sort of like metadata. The collections are like metadata. But more to the point here, we've been using, well, at least talking about, I've mostly been using the star ratings, but we have the pick and reject flag, the edit status, color labels, and the kind of files. And so that gives us some basic starting points, but sometimes you might want to search for photos based on other metadata values. And so on the right panel in the library module, we have a metadata section. And within that metadata section, of course, you can browse metadata for your photos. The default option is the default. And so if I click the pop-up here and choose default, these are the metadata fields that are typically displayed. And so, for example, showing us the camera that was used and the lens that was used, camera settings, date and time of capture. I generally prefer to choose the EXIF and IPTC option here, just because it gives us more information to review and to use as the basis of locating photos. So I'll choose that option. That gives us the EXIF camera data as well as the IPTC, which is, you can sort of think of as a journalistic type of metadata where we have headlines and other details about the photo. And so if you've updated some of that information in metadata, you could certainly use that as the basis of locating photos. And we'll see some examples of that a little bit later. But first, let's consider some of the other options that are available here. And so when we're reviewing metadata here in the metadata section on the right panel in the library module, one of the things you might notice is that some of these values actually have a little button with an arrow over toward the right. And that's actually a search option. So here, for example, the currently selected image was captured, in this case, using a Tamron 18 to 400 millimeter lens. Well, what if I realized that there were other photos captured with that same lens that I might like to take a look at? I can click on that button. So here I'm using the specific lens as an example. I can use, as you can see, camera serial number, GPS coordinates, the email address of the photographer, presumably. So a variety of different details that I can use as search criteria. And so I'll use lens as this example. I'll click on that arrow button over toward the right, and that will create a filter. We'll see this filter in more detail here in just a moment. But now I've automatically been taken to the All Photographs collection in the Catalog section at the top of the left panel here in the Library module. And this is still the Library filter bar. We've just moved on from the Attribute tab to the Metadata tab. And among the list of options, you can see that this third column happens to be the lens option. And you can see that that particular lens has been selected. So I'm filtering my images based on all photos that were captured with this particular lens. Of course, I can mix and match. I can also say photos with that lens with an attribute of 1 star or greater. And I'm now going to press the # key on the keyboard just to hide the library filter bar. The filter, as I've set it, will still be applicable. I'm just going to hide it so that I can see more of my photos. And now I'm able to view, in this particular case, all photos captured with that 18 to 400 millimeter lens, and to which I've assigned a 1-star rating. And so that obviously gives me tremendous flexibility. Sometimes you might just be sort of randomly navigating among your photos, for example. So if I just navigate, and let me just turn off my filter criteria here really quickly, and I go to an image and say, oh, wow, that's a really close-up. I wonder if I have any other close-up photos of the sun. Well, that would require a long lens, specifically a 600 millimeter lens. In this case, with a 150 to 600 millimeter lens, I can very quickly navigate to all photos. I'll switch to the grid view display here. All photos captured with that 150 to 600 millimeter lens. So again, starting to get into some more of the details here of how we're able to filter our images based on whatever it is that we can remember about our images. And so one of the other options that we can make use of is keywords. So we've been looking at some of the metadata options that are available here in the metadata section, but there's also the keyword list. And so if you add keywords to your photos, which I certainly encourage, because it makes it a lot easier to locate a particular photo or to remind you, what is this subject, or what's the name of this subject or location or person, whatever the case might be, that appears in a photo after you've located the photo. So I'll click to expand the keyword list, and I can go through all of these photos, all of these keywords that relate to my photos. So this list, by the way, shows me all keywords for all photos in my entire Lightroom Classic catalog. And so if I'm looking for something in particular, and in fact, as we saw with the folders list, the keyword list can also be searched, essentially. So I can click into the search field, and let's say I'm looking for photos from Busan, South Korea. I can type that search, and now you'll see when I hover over a keyword on the keyword list, whether or not I've done a search here to filter the list, over toward the right, first off, I see an indication of how many photos in this particular catalog have that keyword assigned to them. And then to the right of that is that arrow button that we saw earlier with metadata, and that is, again, essentially a search button. So I'll click that button, and that will take me to, once again, all photographs, browsing only the images that actually have Busan assigned as a keyword. Busan happens to be in South Korea, and so if I go to the keywording section over on the right panel, you'll see the keywords that have been assigned here. So Asia, Busan, and South Korea. And so just thinking about what sort of image I might be looking for, what sort of photo I might want to track down, if I have a sense of the subject matter or location, I can quite likely use that keyword list. I'll release that filter there just by clicking the X so that we can see more of that filtering. So here, for example, photos of crop dusters with the crop duster keyword. And so I could use that as an initial filter, and then once again pressing \, I'll go to attribute, and let's see if we have any 2-star, no, 1-star or greater. There we go. We have some photos with a 1-star rating and that include the keyword crop duster so that I'm able to locate those photos. And again, obviously, I'm using a variety of examples and, sort of searching for random images, you might say. But the idea, again, is to be aware, to be familiar with these various options for filtering your images, because then you're able to use those various options when you do know what it is that you're looking for. If you were looking for a photo of a crop duster, then that crop duster keyword could obviously be a good starting point. And there's might be other details that you remember. Maybe you happen to remember you were using a particular shutter speed to get just a little bit of blur for the propeller, and so you happen to recall the shutter speed or which lens or which camera. Whatever details, again, that you can remember about a photo, there's a really good chance that you can use those details to track down a particular photo. So let's take a look. We've gotten a little bit of a sense of some of the criteria that are available. In fact, let's use crop dusters as our example. Let's assume that we photograph crop dusters on a regular basis, and we want to have a collection that includes our best crop duster photos. And so let's take a look at that, because a collection, a smart collection specifically, is really just saved search results. And so we can use a smart collection to define the criteria for the photos that we want to effectively search for, and that smart collection will automatically include those photos. So on the left panel here in the library module, you'll find the collections panel. And over to the right of the heading for collections, you'll find the plus button. We can click, and instead of creating a normal collection, as it were, a collection where we need to drag photos and drop them into the collection, for example, with a normal collection, we need to add photos to or remove photos from a collection as we see fit. With a smart collection, the collection represents a saved search result effectively, so that you can have a smart collection based on certain criteria. And as photos gain that criteria, they'll be added to the smart collection. And as they lose that criteria, they'll be removed from the smart collection. So again, basically just a saved search result. So I'll choose Create Smart Collection. We'll give this a name. I'll call this Favorite Crop Dusters. And then I don't need to include it in a collection set. I'll specify my rating. Well, since rating is the first option, the default option here, and that makes sense since I'm looking for my favorites, I'll specify that the star rating must be greater than or equal to 1 star. But I don't just want 1 star or greater rated images. I want specifically star-rated images that also contain a crop duster, more specifically, crop duster as a keyword. Well, over to the right of my first criterion here, there is a plus button. I can click that plus button to effectively add a row, and then I can click the pop-up over at the far left and choose among a variety of metadata options that I can effectively search based on. And in this case, I'm looking for keyword, which happens to be listed under other metadata. So I'll choose other metadata and then keywords, and then contains, and in the search field, I'll just type crop duster, for example. Note that I can require that it contains all of the keywords separated by commas, for example, that it not contain them, that it starts with a particular set of letters or ends with, that it's empty versus not empty, etc. So a variety of options depending on the specific metadata value that we have selected. So that is all the criteria that I need in this case. I'll go ahead and click Create, and you'll see now that I have a favorite crop dusters collection. And if I navigate to that collection and view the contents of that collection, you'll see, well, of course, in this case, every photo does contain a crop duster, but more to the point, all of the photos in this case have crop duster as a keyword, and all of them have a 1 star or greater rating. And so let's take this photo, for example. Let's assume that I decide I don't really need this photo. It's disappearing behind a hill. If I remove the star rating, remember, photos are only included in this smart collection if they have crop duster as a keyword and if they have a 1 star or greater rating. So if I remove the keyword or reduce the star rating, the photo will disappear. So I'm going to press the number 0 to set the star rating to 0 stars so that this image will no longer have a star rating, and that image therefore is no longer in that favorite crop dusters collection. So again, being able to use various metadata criteria to identify favorite photos versus not so favorite photos, or photos with particular contents in the context of metadata, so keywords, for example. Again, the idea being whatever we can remember, we can use to locate photos, and when it comes to a smart collection, we effectively have a saved search result. So whenever I want to go see my favorite crop dusters, I can find them right here without having to go configure a variety of metadata values for my filtering. And then, of course, there's more, naturally. So I'm going to switch back to all photographs, in fact, so that we can get a little bit of a better sense of the possibilities here. I'm going to press / once again to reveal the library filter bar, and I'm going to set the option to none here initially. So we've already taken a look at attribute. We've looked briefly at metadata. We'll take a closer look at that in a moment, but let's consider the text option. So I'll click and search by text. You can see that my previous search is still dialed in here. So the file name contains HDR for high dynamic range. And so I can, of course, clear this out. So I could search, for example, any searchable field. That doesn't mean everything in metadata, but it means many of the common searchable fields. And again, as we saw earlier, contains versus contains all of the words, or starts or ends with, etc. And in fact, I'm going to change this. What shall we use? How about 500? What does that mean? I don't know. I just made it up on the spot. So I'm searching for photos that contain 500 in metadata. What does that mean? Well, it depends. It could be a number of things. So for example, the photo that's selected here first, if you take a look over here underneath the histogram, you can see that the shutter speed is 1/500th of a second. And I might have some photos in here, maybe this one perhaps, I think. Yes, indeed, I was right. So that happens to have been captured with a 500 millimeter lens. Or there might be a 500 showing up in some other field in metadata. Maybe I was photographing the car race, the Indianapolis 500, and so Indy 500 is a keyword, for example. So that would suit that search criteria. So again, I'm not being very specific in this case, but again, if I could only remember, I know 500 appears somewhere in the metadata, then I could certainly search for that. Naturally, it's more useful here if we can be a little bit more specific. So for example, somebody says, oh yeah, I know the file name had, a particular set of numbers. For example, it was 4369 was part of the file name. So I can search by file name, and I'll set this to 4369, and there is that red barn image that I was looking for. Again, just kind of making things up here on the fly to give us some examples. So, a client says, oh, here's the file name for that photo. We can plug in those details. The copy name, which would relate typically to a virtual copy, the title or caption information from metadata if you'd updated those values, and keywords, which of course can be a helpful option as well, or just searching broadly across all of your photos potentially with all of the metadata that's actually searchable within Lightroom Classic. And so, again, that gives you a bit of flexibility in terms of how you're searching. But I would say, for my money, the most valuable option when it comes to searching for particular photos is to filter by metadata. Well, okay, we've been filtering by metadata for basically all of these searches, but I'm referring specifically to the Metadata tab of that library filter bar. So I typically set this option back to none when I'm finished so that I don't have any other settings established. And then in this case, I'll go back to the metadata option. There we go. And in fact, I'm going to reset. So I'm going to set the columns here to the default columns. And so I will just go to default columns there from the pop-up here at the top right. And I'm also going to click for date. By default, the date is a list of all dates. I prefer a hierarchical list. And so I'll click the pop-up at the top right of the date heading here and choose hierarchical. And then we can determine what some of the various options might be for tracking down a particular photo. And this, once again, is especially helpful, I find, when we really have no idea which folder an image is contained in. If we knew the folder, we could navigate to the folder and use some of the various options, including those that we're going to see here in just a moment. But typically, using the Metadata tab for the library filter bar is especially helpful when we're choosing all photographs in the catalog section on the left panel. And that's because this really gets to the point of any details we can remember about our photos, about how they were captured, for example, can probably be used to locate a particular image. So here are the default columns, the default categories essentially. And so we have date over here on the left, and I can say, I'm looking for photos from 2019 or 2020 or both 2019 and 2020. So I can click on the first and hold the Shift key and click on the last. I can hold the Control or Command key and click on other years. And so I can mix and match, just as we saw earlier with mixing and matching among various folders, so too can we mix and match among various, well, in this case, years, but what if we know more detail than that? We know that it was in 2019, but we also know what month it was. I can click that little triangle to the left of, in this case, 2019, to expand the list. And then I can say, well, I think it was March, so I'll go to March. I can expand that list as well. I know it was on a Tuesday, whatever details I can actually remember about when. For me, this is not usually a good option because it's pretty rare that I actually remember what date I captured a particular photo. But then I can go through the other options. So let's say we're just looking through the entirety of March. So I'll choose March once again there. And the next column is camera, so I could specify, well, it was that digital SLR, the Canon 7D Mark II, and apparently with the Tamron 18 to 400 millimeter lens, so I'm working my way here. I also know that the shot I'm looking for was a somewhat wide-angle shot. I don't remember exactly, and in this case I've got a lens that goes from 18 millimeters, quite wide angle, to 400 millimeters, rather telephoto. Obviously the photo itself was somewhere in between. So I'm going to go over to the last column, which is label, which means color label. Well, that's not going to help me here. But fortunately, I can change that column. So I'm going to click up there where it says label for color label, and I can choose some other value. So maybe the focal length, for example. And I know it was less than 30 millimeters. So I can click on 30, hold the Shift key, and click on 18. And now I've narrowed that range a little bit more. Perhaps there's other details. Now, of course, I might be using the attribute, so filtering based on star rating, for example, or if I can remember additional details. Here I've used all 4 columns of my Metadata tab for the library filter, but I can actually add additional columns. And so up at the top right, I'll click that little pop-up and then choose to add a column. Note that we could remove a column as well. And then I could specify some other option. Now, when you add a column, you'll find that the multiple selections will often be cleared out. So I'll reset that. And then I can change the format. So maybe, for example, I know that I'm looking for an image that I converted to an HDR, which would create a DNG file. So maybe I want file type as one of my options, and I could choose digital negative, for example. And now I've narrowed down that list of images from, we started off with 2,653 photos, and gradually through different criteria have narrowed that down to just 2 images at the moment, which happens to be an HDR image in this case, of course, based on the criteria with a wide angle lens, etc. And just using that as an example of being able to really mix and match those different options. And so taking whatever details you can remember. It might be a lens, it might be a focal length, it might be, let's take a look at a quick example here. For example, I'll go back to all dates, and maybe I know that the focal length was once again relatively wide, let's say 30 millimeters down to perhaps 10 millimeters. And I also know that I stopped the lens down to try to get a starburst effect. So from the last column, I'll go ahead and choose to adjust this filter based on the lens aperture. And I typically use somewhere in the f16 to f22 range when I want a starburst. I still have that star rating option selected. We're down now to just 193 images. That's still a lot of photos to go scrolling through. Again, I can press the / key to hide that library filter bar temporarily. But hopefully this would help me get to the particular photo that I'm looking for. If not, I can try to specify additional criteria. So I'll press / to bring that up again, and I can add another column, for example. Maybe I know that the shutter speed was within a certain range. So let me just reset my other filters here. Again, note, I consider that essentially a bug in Lightroom Classic, but that as we add a column, we reset some of those filtering options. And so you might want to add additional columns if you know you're going to use them. But in this case, for example, let's say we want to use, oops, I selected aperture. Let's choose shutter speed there. There we go. And let's say it's a longer exposure, so anything, longer than a second, let's say. So now we have 1 second through 30-second exposures. I'll press backslash again to hide that filter bar just so that I can see the images a little bit better. And then again, scrolling through and hopefully tracking down exactly the image that I was looking for. And so, perhaps it was, well, there we go, lightning strike. That was not in metadata, but the lens was stopped down apparently. But again, the point being is that we can use that metadata tab on the library filter bar to filter by a wide variety of different metadata values, and that gives us some flexibility in terms of how we're looking for photos, which more to the point means that whatever details you can remember that might be in metadata, there's a good chance you can use the library filter bar in general, but again, I do find that metadata tab to be especially helpful. Let's go ahead and filter by none, and I do want to show you one other option here that relates to finding photos for people. And so there is a people view. So if you've enabled the automatic detection of faces in your photos, and then you've used this people view to actually identify those people, then we can go through and see, here's for example, the named people who have been named in my photo. So I type in the name. And what's great about this feature is that as you add additional names to additional photos of the same person, when you identify the person, Lightroom starts to get smarter and smarter. And so it tries to see if it can find, do we have any other photos of me? No other photos that have not been identified yet. But then Lightroom will help you essentially to identify, is this Tim Gray, for example, that appears in this photo? And so here, finding photos based on the person that has been identified in the image. And so we could then use that as the basis of then navigating to a particular photo. So here I've double clicked. I'm going to click the back button up here essentially at the top left to go back to all people. So in the people view, I can double click on a person and then go find a photo of that person, double click to see that image. And here's another great feature that I think can be tremendously valuable when you maybe sort of stumble upon a photo or locate a photo by what seem like somewhat random means. Now I want to go to the folder that contains this image. Well, I can do that no matter how I found the photo or where I am right now within Lightroom Classic. I can right-click on the image and then go to folder in library. Go to this image in the folder that contains it. So I'll choose that option, and you can see it's located in a Southwest road trip folder, and maybe I had been looking for other photos of myself, but again, using that feature in Lightroom Classic to identify which photos contain faces, so contain people, and then you can use that to identify the people. Well, more to the point for our purposes here today, that enables you to then locate photos based on those people. And then there's another option. So I've talked about a variety of different metadata values, but one of the great metadata options is location information. So I'm going to go back to all photographs, and then I'll navigate. We're in the people view. I can go into the loop view here, but I'm going to navigate now to the map module just to demonstrate briefly that we can also locate photos on the map. So this is the hybrid map. I'm going to switch the map down here at the bottom left to the road map display just because it's a little bit less cluttered, and I'll zoom out so we can take a look at the broader map. And here you can see that I have photos that were captured with a camera that includes a built-in GPS receiver. That could be a smartphone or mirrorless SLR. As long as it's got a built-in GPS receiver, then it's possible to have your photos contain metadata, location metadata, automatically based on GPS coordinates. You can also add photos, so I can drag and drop photos onto the map in the appropriate location in order to add location information based on the map. And then one of the things that I really like about that map, of course, sometimes it's just interesting, like, hey, wait, where did I capture, this particular photo? And we can track down where an image was captured. But you can also use the map to locate photos. And sometimes, I'm just randomly browsing around the map and looking in different areas. I'm not sure exactly what it is that I'm looking for. And then I remember, Kangaroo Island. Yes, I think I had some nice photos captured on Kangaroo Island. And yes, true to its name, Kangaroo Island does feature some kangaroos, and so I could go track down hopefully some pictures of kangaroos just based on browsing the map. And so based on location information embedded in metadata, either with the camera that has that feature built in, or as I mentioned, just dragging photos onto the map itself. And then I can locate photos of, in this case, kangaroos from Kangaroo Island, just based on browsing around on the map.
So what that all boils down to is that whatever details you can remember about a particular photo can probably help you locate that image in Lightroom Classic, so that ultimately you'll hopefully be able to find photos fast, any photo you're looking for when you're looking for it. Thanks for joining me today, and be sure to check out timgrayphoto.com to learn more about me and the various projects I have going on.